and I am trying something new. This is the big picture, of course, the show where we interview people sometimes, and other times it's just me rambling for about an hour, maybe half an hour, as some of the shows have been as of recent. I'm going to turn up the volume of this mic a bit, just so it picks up everything I'm laying down. I am also, instead of recording a live Facebook, I am recording on my laptop. And I am here today with my good friend, Erin.
What up?
Erin, yeah, Erin's there. I guess just to start off with, we'll just do the stereotypical, like, icebreaker thing. Like, name, etc.
Etc.
Favorite ice cream, you know, all that stuff.
All right, cool. My name is Erin. That's not my real name, but it's the name that people find easier to pronounce.
Yes.
So it is the name that I gave myself. I am a sophomore at Knox. I am a creative writing major. I was like,
you had to think about that.
I had to think about it for a moment. I was like, what am I doing here? I study creative writing.
Yeah,
that's a thing that I do. And I'm also currently a psych minor with a planned history minor.
Oh, okay.
Gonna double minor. What else am I?
Well, you're in improv.
Yes, I'm in improv.
You're in.
I love improv.
Yeah. You're in Common Ground exec, right?
Yep, I'm also in Common Ground. For those of you don't know.
Yeah.
Because Common Ground is pretty we try not to be obscure.
Yeah. What is the official title of what Common? Because I always just sort of say I usually tell people it's an LGBTQ alliance sort of.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just Common Ground was dead for a while, but now we're not. And
yeah,
we're
it's actually really
trying to do a lot of things, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I'm a part of that. I'm also on Quiver, the genre magazine.
Yeah.
Quiver staff.
Isn't that January 20 or is that 18th? I'm trying to remember when.
Oh, the release party?
Yeah.
Our release party is this Saturday.
So the 18th probably, right?
The 19th.
The 19th.
Yes.
There you are. So, with all that, I actually do want to start off with the wonderful story about your actual name.
Oh, yes. I feel like if you don't know me, then this is a good way to get to know me. But my parents are super religious. Mm-hmm. And my dad's a pastor. His dad was a pastor. And they run a church back home in Korea. And usually when Korean kids are born, not only do we have a name that's in Korean characters, but we have corresponding Chinese characters to our name. And it's so if you, I didn't bring my wallet with me, but on my Korean ID card, it has my name, and then in parentheses it would have my name in Chinese characters. But while my last name has a Chinese character, my first name doesn't. So it's just a quote unquote a pure Korean name. But my Korean name is Yerim, and my parents, being the very religious folk that they were like, we need to give our child a religious name.
Of course.
And so my name spelled out, the meaning in Korean is 예수님의 재림. So they took that, the first word and the last word, and then shortened it to Yerim. And it essentially means the rapture.
The coming back of Christ.
Yeah, the second coming of Christ.
Which
is
the
rapture.
A really awesome name, I have to say. You are the rapture.
Yes, I am the rapture. Someone recently called me the apocalypse too, and so I was like, I can live with that.
Yeah, which I find that very interesting, and I don't know if this is an insult or a compliment. We'll find out. I often find myself going, "Oh yeah, Erin's from South Korea." Mm-hmm. I forget that because I don't know. You just feel so integrated, if that makes sense, or because your English is perfect and
it's been it's actually really confusing for myself too, because I spent a lot of my childhood was growing up in the States. Mm-hmm. So I went to preschool here. I went to elementary school here. I didn't actually learn how to speak Korean until I moved back to South Korea. And, like, I had like, hardwire to learn it as, like, a survival instinct, you know, because I was going to school, like, a public school, and I didn't know how to communicate with any of the kids.
Yeah.
And so, and then I spent, like, my, like, teen years, I guess, in South Korea. And a lot of that time was kind of spent, like, being, like, I don't really, like, belong here. I don't find this place like my home. Like, I want to go back to my house in the States. I want to, like, go back to going to school.
Where did you live in the States?
I lived in Deerfield, Illinois for the longest period of time. We moved around a lot. So I lived in Tennessee for a bit, then lived in Michigan for a bit, moved around in Michigan, and then we went to Illinois.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's like, it's like a northern suburb of Chicago.
Okay. And so when you moved to South Korea, you were doing high school there. Were you born in South Korea?
Yeah.
So was it sort of a born in South Korea, early childhood Americas, and then that's really interesting.
Yeah. So I was born in South Korea, and but I came to the States when I was like 2, so I have no memories of that at all. And like all of my earliest memories is like growing up in the States.
Didn't know that you in your like preschool, elementary lived in America. That actually fascinates me a lot. So, why the move back to South Korea? What was the catalyst for that?
We were originally here because like my dad was studying, and he was like getting his MBA, his other masters in some sort of ancient history, and then his PhD. And so like my entire family was only here because we were on my dad's student visa, and then there was at one point where like my dad was thinking about like, you know, getting us like naturalized, you know, getting a green card and like still making our stay in the States permanent. But then like someone screwed him over. That's actually a funny story. But someone screwed him over, and then he was like, guess it must be God's plan to not remain in the States.
Wow. So
around like when I was in like the 6th grade, my grandpa passed away, and so then my family went to Korea for like the first time in like 10 years
because that's where your
so to like for his funeral, and that was like when I got to meet like all of my extended family for the very first time. Oof. And everything, and my dad was like, well, now that like your grandpa's gone, something has to happen to like the church that he owns. And so my dad was like not really trustful of all the other people in the church, so he was just like, I'll just take over it. And so we left him behind there, and then me and my mom and like my siblings, we all went back to the States to like just kind of like get like wrap things up for like a year before we all moved back.
Wow.
So
yeah. So your family currently lives in South Korea? Yes? Okay.
Yep. So both my parents are there, and my youngest brother is there too.
Yes, your youngest brother. There's a lot I feel like we could talk about. We'll just take it in stride. So the decision to, I guess since this is a Knox college thing, so with that moving back and forth and living in South Korea, why did you decide to go to a college back in the States? Was it because you still felt like that was home? Was that part of it, or was
that was definitely the biggest part? Because when I was like younger, I've very much enjoyed like going to school, learning new things, you know, studying or like just like reading, being in a classroom environment. Like that was one of the most like that I absolutely enjoyed it as a kid, as nerdy as it sounds.
Yeah.
But
now you hate it.
No, I still really enjoy it. Yeah, I love it. I love being in class. But when I moved back to Korea, everything was just so different. Like from the get-go, I didn't understand most of the classes. Like nothing that the teachers were saying to me made sense because I didn't know the language completely. And my grades like plummeted. Like I went from being like a straight A student to like straight Fs within the span of a year. and I was just super lost, and I no longer wanted to like go to school. I didn't want to do anything with my life at that point. And I was pretty severely depressed with the entire moving thing and everything.
I mean, it's one thing to move from like state to state. It's another thing to move to like a completely, well, maybe, you know, different culture, different language. That's got to be.
And it was really hard because no matter how like I spent my childhood like kind of like surrounded by like a Korean community, but no matter how much like that community like was there, I was still in like America. I was hanging out with like kids who are American and kids who like, and like all the people that I interacted with besides like my parents and like besides the people at like the church I attended as a kid. Yeah. Everyone else was like, you know, had like very like American cultural ideas and like, you know, so as soon as I went somewhere where that wasn't the norm, I was just like so lost and everything felt so strange and different. And I was just not enjoying my time.
How did you get through that sort of depressed stage while you were in South Korea? Like, was there a breakthrough moment there, or was it you coming back here that was the...
I think I spent a lot of time distracting myself from, like, you know, because I knew school and like the idea of like college and like my future was like a major like depressing part of like myself.
Yeah.
At
worrying
that time,
about it,
just worrying about it and stuff. So like I just kind of like pushed it aside and distracted myself. So like I spent a lot of my time, and like all the friends I was hanging out with, a lot of my friends that like my best friends from middle school were all like kids who came from like the same boat. So
were kids from the States who ended up
and so we all just kind of like we're just like, well, what are we gonna do? So we spent a lot of time just kind of like, you know, messing around, and at that point like we've just completely like kind of like tossed academics out of the window. And I distracted myself a lot with just kind of like mundane things like that, and like trying to like push away the worries for a later time.
Was Red Velvet and K-pop part of that, or was Red Velvet a thing back in those times? When did Red Velvet start? Because you're a big fan of that.
Yes. K-pop was actually a big thing for me. It was like the one thing that I actually like kind of that I could like enjoy without feeling like it was tainted with like sadness or something. That makes sense.
And that's really important to have that thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like before that, so like Red Velvet didn't like come out as a group until 2014. But I got into K-pop around like 2011, which is when I moved back to Korea. Yeah. And so I had a different group that I liked before then, and they were a group called Girls' Generation. It's really corny. Yeah. Corny name.
It's not nearly as good of a name as Red Velvet.
Oh, like when you're in K-pop, some of the names are so corny, and it just gives me like weird chills down my back because they're all so cringy. Yeah. But like, yeah, the first K-pop group that I really liked was a group called Girls' Generation, and like, that's and like I kind of like I've switched groups that I enjoy listening to and like follow, but they kind of do hold like the same sort of role in my life, as in like they're the one constant thing that doesn't make me like
anxious or upset. Yeah, it's that. Yeah, that's good. So you were in this new place. You did have friends that were in a similar boat. You were distracting yourself. And I don't know if this is too deep. Would you say you're still distracting yourself, or would you say you've reached a point where
I've reached like a really weird point in my life where like the moment I like came to Knox and like, you know, like last year fall term, like when everything's new and like college is new and you're just, I was like, this is it. Like, this is what I've been waiting for, like the past like 7 years of my life.
It is very much like here we are. This is what high school teachers have been telling me, my parents, you know, here it is.
Yeah. And so like, and like the one thing that's like was ever like a constant longing in my life when I was in Korea was like, I have to go back to like the States. Like I can't stay here anymore. I can't live here. But and then like when I got back, I was just like on this like high, and I was just like, oh, I'm finally back. This is like where my life is like going to like go up and not like just go up constantly, and like this is the turning point in my life. And then like halfway through, I realized how much I missed being back home. And like that was, and sometime like around like it was like around midterms, that was like the first time when I actually thought of like my house in Korea as like home.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a huge like shock to me, and I was like, what the heck? Because before that,
you had never seen it as home.
I've never seen it as home, and it's only been like a source of like kind of like confinement for me. So when I started missing like my friends and like my life back in South Korea, I was just like, what is this feeling? Like this is so strange, and it makes me so uncomfortable. And I suddenly felt like super like dissatisfied, I guess, with my life at Knox.
Yeah. Like maybe were you feeling like you made a mistake going there, or
there was like a little bit of like that kind of sort of like regret about coming to Knox, like a little bit. But it was more of like, I don't know, I was just shocked, I guess. And I just didn't know what to do with myself, because I think a lot of it also like kind of was because I was like putting a lot of expectations on what like being in college, what being at Knox would be like. I had a lot of expectations for it.
Any major examples of like expectation wise? Were they academic, social, like what? I
think a lot of it just had to do with like social, because I just felt that I would be more like comfortable living in the U.S. again. And like, while there's definitely a lot of like parts that are more comfortable, it's kind of also made me realize that I'm not the same person that I was like when I moved away. And also like the place that I'm in isn't the same. Like I'm not like, it's been like 7-8 years, almost a decade. So like there's definitely been like a cultural change
in the Americas,
right? So like I guess a lot of there was a part of me that I didn't know, that was expecting things to be exactly the same when I got back. But it wasn't the same, and so I was just kind of like, oh. Yeah,
it's that realization that things change, I suppose, right? Yeah. Man, that's crazy. So, but I know, so I guess timeline-wise, does this lead to you go through freshman year, fall term? Does this then lead into winter term where you get into improv and other clubs and stuff like that? Isn't that kind of when you started to really extracurricular yourself?
So like fall term, another whole thing was that the people that I lived with in fall term were all like upperclassmen. I don't know why Knox did this, but they put me into Williston, and like everyone knows that Williston is like an upperclassman housing.
I remember you talked about that.
Yeah, and I was like super confused. So like when everyone was on like that Facebook group, they're like, oh, like which building are you living in, blah blah blah. I posted, I was like, anybody living in Williston? Nobody replied. And I was like, wonder what's going on here. And then I find out that like my roommate and my suite mates, I love them all very much. I don't know if you know Sam, but Sam, and there's Evan and Hannah. And so like Sam was my roommate, and Evan and Hannah were my suite mates, and I love them. They're my best friends, and I love them so much. But like when I first heard that I was the only freshman in a suite of juniors, I was like
intimidated.
What? Yeah, and I had a family friend who was already like attending Knox, and so I had asked her like, is there ever like a situation when they put like a freshman in a room with a junior? And she was like, oh no, they'd never do that. And I was like, hey,
all right, okay, all right, we're good.
That was a lie.
Yeah,
obviously,
they apparently do.
Was a lie. But yeah, and so like, and then like they quickly became like my friend group, and I was hanging out with like Sam, Evan, Hannah, and then like Josh, Mitch, and then Mitch, Megan, Hallie came like after they came back from study abroad. But like I was hanging around, I was hanging around like all juniors, and then I wasn't in like improv then or like frisbee or any of like the big social
groups where you
right?
could meet other people your age range. Well, not your age range because you're actually older than, but your academic year group. Yeah.
So like I didn't have like a lot of freshman friends then, and I was just kind of like a lot of that time was also spent worrying like what am I going to do when my entire friend group graduates.
Oh yeah.
And it was just like a whole thing. And so that's kind of like why in like winter term I was like I should like, you know, try to make more friends in my class year so that like I don't end up feeling like I'm being left behind or anything.
No, definitely.
Yeah, and that's when I joined improv.
What was the catalyst to join improv? Like, was it a person telling you to go? Josh? I was hoping it would be Josh.
It's always Josh.
The love of my life.
Yeah. So, I do have like this one distinct memory though of it was me, Jackie, and Sam. And Jackie and Sam at the time were like doing nonfiction, like their nonfiction workshop together. And I had like met Jackie very briefly, like I just knew her name.
Yeah.
That was about it. But me, Jackie, and Sam were all in CFA for some reason, like right in front of like where the art gallery is now.
Yeah.
We're just like sitting around there, and Jackie was like, "Oh, you should join improv." And I was like, "Oh, I'm not good at that kind of thing. I don't know where to start with that."
Yeah.
I'm
the usual response when someone is told, "Hey, join improv."
Right. And then but like we were talking, and then it got to a point where I was just like pretending to be dead on the floor and like dying or something. And then Jackie was like, "This is exactly improv. This is what you do." And I was like, "Okay, I guess."
Yeah.
And then winter term came, and Josh was like, "Yeah, you should like come see improv." And I was like, "Okay, I'll go to one rehearsal. Go to one rehearsal just to check it out." As you can see, I've come to almost every single rehearsal that I can go to.
Evening classes,
since.
Man.
Oh yeah,
they suck.
It sucks.
But yeah, no, you go to almost like every one. Part of exec now. What was it about that first rehearsal that like, can you even identify what it was, or was it just?
I think at first I was like super intimidated because the first rehearsal that I ever joined was in Harbach. And I was like, "Oh, that's a big stage." And
I remember that our first winter term rehearsals were in Harbach. I remember that. Yeah.
And it was like super, I was just like, "Oh, this feels like an audition for something."
Yeah.
And I'm super nervous about everything. But I don't know, it's just everyone was having so much fun doing improv. And I've always liked acting. And like theater is something that I've always very much enjoyed, but I could never like immerse myself into Knox theater because it honestly does terrify me. Like,
no, yeah, there's some people who are like, "No, Knox theater is totally inclusive," and I go, it might be really open to people, but I also feel like it's such a time consumption and like it's intimidated, I think, to most people.
And then there's definitely a certain kind of person that is a part of Knox theater. Like, especially as like an actor, like as someone who is into acting and being up on stage, there's definitely like
and there's some good actors out there. John Harden.
Oh yeah, they're all
so many good
like
people.
Knox theater has like some fantastic actors and fantastic crew, and they're really good at what they do. But like I guess for me, like it's not something that I want to like. There's still so many other things that I want to do.
And it's not
Knox.
something I think you would agree. Like I myself, and I think maybe you aren't so passionate about that we'd want to put all that time into it.
Definitely.
You know, like I couldn't put the time. Like rep term? You kidding me? That's insane.
Yeah. And so like I even like considered rep term. I was like, it'd be like a cool opportunity. But if I did rep term, I'd be missing out on all these classes I want to take.
Yeah.
And like all these different things that I want to do and all these like responsibilities that I have. And so I was just like, it's not for me.
I think that's kind of what makes improv great and what it is that it's really not a time commitment. And yet it feels so like take, I don't know, like Max Sebastianos, people who, though Max has been coming more recently, Max has been, I think he comes every Sunday now. Yeah. Because Wednesdays he can't. But like people like that who they don't show up a lot. But when they do, they're like welcome. They're like, hey, yeah. Because I don't know. That's what improv's great, I think, of how open we are. And I remember we had that conversation, me, Jackie, I think Amber was there actually, to one of the founders of Improv Club during the moment, and that's what he told. His big thing was like, is improv still like open? Do you guys like, that's the thing he asked, and like, yeah, no, totally. He's like, yeah, we founded it like we wanted anyone to be able to show up and do it. Yeah, and I think that's just great. That's my rant. It's my.
I mean, well, I definitely can't say that, you know, it's all been like fine and dandy for me improv. because it's like open. But I do enjoy that it is like open because it does, like, it lets it's like it gives you that dose of like what theater is like, but also like, you know, it kind of like fits around your schedule and stuff like that. And it's also not theater in that like really anything goes. Yes. And there's like a sort of like creative
comedic freedom, like
exactly. And as someone who is like very much I enjoy like creating a story and telling a story that I've created, and I feel like improv is such a good outlet for that. And like I've just been, and it improv definitely affects like my writing too, with like just because of all the witty things that people are able to say like on the spot. And like just all the different kinds of like
stories that can be built just off what people are saying. Gosh. Like Goon River, I sometimes sit there and I go, just a bunch of monologues come together to make this story, and it's great.
I love Goon River. I hated Goon River when, like, last year, winter term. I thought it was the hardest thing in the world. And I was just like, why would anybody want to play this, like, ever?
And now you're like...
I love it. I love Goon River.
It might be worth saying for any listeners who are not part of improv. Goon River is a game. It's 6 improvisers. Each improviser, it's 3 rounds. So the first round, each improviser will come out and do a monologue as a character in a small town. They all know each other, and so they might come out that first round and be like, hey, I'm Jiminy, and I play cricket all the time, but my buddy in the pillow factory, he's a real jerk, and, you know, you say stuff like that. And then second round, you establish more of the relationship and maybe even a conflict. And then third round, you establish a place to meet, because at the end... after the third round, everyone's going to meet in one place, in one big scene. And then in that one big scene...
someone dies.
But in doing that, like, everyone's doing these monologues, and you create this story. And it's just so... it's so fantastic. I hope that made sense to anyone listening. But...
it's so, like... because, like, for example, like, just like yesterday when we were playing Goon River at rehearsal, and I was like that cat lady... and then suddenly Alex comes in and, like, murders my cat and turns my cat into, like... a scarf. I had no idea.
You had no idea that was gonna happen.
She wrecked it, and I was just like, honestly, I was like gonna like carry that cat into the final scene, and like I was thinking that I was gonna have to like handle that chair as my cat and like into the final scene, but like Alex did something completely unexpected. So like.
She took away the cat, but she gave you, like, an arc of emotion, and, like, she gave you more than she took, really. It's like... But Alex is also, like, a brilliant improviser.
Alex is so good. Just, like, the entire, like, senior group of improvisers. I don't... We have some, like, really great improvisers right now, but I don't know what we're going to do without the seniors next year.
Listen, we have 2 more terms. Well, because it's the whole thing, like, our junior class consists of Liam and Kat, I believe.
Yeah, but Kat's going, so...
yeah, Kat's going. And, like, I was talking to someone about this. Like, the state of it, like, we have a lot of freshmen. We do. And that can be... I think some people are overwhelmed by how many freshmen we have, which is fair, because we have a lot. And they seem dedicated. Like, not many of them have, like, left. Like, because at first I was like, oh, guys, don't worry about it. Like, most of them will leave. And it seems like they aren't going to leave. But I think that's good because of how small our junior class is. And I think, like, we need those numbers at least right now.
I love our freshmen, honestly.
They're
I was
really
like,
nice.
I was one of the people who was intimidated by how many freshmen we had.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, you and the other freshmen tried to rope more freshmen in, and I was like, red lights in my head.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and I was just like, I love new people, but also this is a lot of people.
I really love new people, and I've stopped bugging, ever since that first rehearsal this term, I have stopped bugging people just because we had 40 people at that rehearsal, and I just
40 people?
I think they counted at that first rehearsal, we had 40 people.
Crap.
And, like, that's a lot of people, and I just sort of went, like, I've bugged them enough last term. If they come, and we'll welcome, right? In fact, one of them was at that rehearsal where we had 40 people. She was there. And I just went, I've bugged them enough. They know every time they see me, mentally they hear, come to improv. So, like, we're good. I don't have to bug them about it,
Yeah.
Golly. Yeah, we just have so many. Mm-hmm. And I agree. I think the pressure is sort of on our age group.
Yeah.
And especially considering that a lot of our age group, I mean, you're going to be studying abroad 2 terms next year.
Yeah.
The pressure's on people like, I think, me, Simone, Tegan, Lily. The pressure will be on for those individuals.
I have so many, like, mixed feelings. Like, I really want to stay just for improv.
Yeah, we should talk. Like, so you're studying abroad to South Korea. Does that have anything to do with, like, what you were saying, like, the homesickness?
More than the homesick. Well, so, like, I talk with my mom, and a lot of it does have to do with, like, money.
Yeah.
Because it's, like,
it's expensive to be here.
It's a lot. It's really expensive to be here. It's crazy. And going abroad, like, I have to fill out my experiential learning somehow. And going abroad is, like, one of the more obvious options. And it's just cheaper to do that in a place where I won't have to be paying for, like, room and board. And, like, I will, like, know how to work the transportation and, like, and, like, my parents don't have to, like, send me money overseas.
Yeah.
And things like that. So, money-wise, my mom, when I, like, brought up, like, the idea as, like, half joke, half whim, my mom was, like, sold. And so she was like, you have to do it. Like, I was like, okay, I guess. But I didn't want to just leave it at that. I wanted to, like, get something out of it. And I've realized, especially since coming to Knox, like, being a writer and, like, writing fiction has always been something that I've, like, it's been a part of me since I was, like, since I've honestly, like, been able to write. And I've always loved telling stories and, like, being a writer. I've been, like, my dream of being a writer has been, like, my dream since I was, like, 9.
Yeah. And
it's still something that I'm so passionate about. But when I came to Knox, I realized what I was writing about, like, significantly changed. Like, when I was younger, I was writing all these stories about, like, I was, like, so 100% sure I was going to be, like, the next J.K. Rowling. as every child.
The young adult novel, Yeah,
with, like, the fantasy and the magic and the dragons and, like, the epic hero who, like, comes out with a sword and, like, slays the bad guys.
Yeah.
That's what I wrote as a kid. But then, like, I took my first fiction, like, my beginning fiction class with Sherwood. I love Sherwood. I took it with him, and he was like, okay, give me, like, your first draft of your first story. I had written something that I've never written before. I usually write in the third person. Yeah. I wrote a first person realistic fiction piece about a funeral.
Whoa.
And, like, the reason I wrote it was actually, something had happened over break. Like, as someone who's, like, into K-pop, I keep up with, a lot of the K-pop news.
Yeah.
But there was, there's this, like, really big K-pop boy group who's, like, really famous in Korea and has a lot of international fans too, and they're called SHINee.
Okay.
But 2017 December, one of the members committed suicide.
Oh.
And it was, like, a huge shock to, like, everyone who was, like, in, like, the K-pop.
In that K-pop circle, yeah.
And it was also, like, a huge shock for me and like all of my friends, like, because we're not fans of SHINee.
Mm-hmm.
We only know of SHINee because, like, they're like popular and like we hear their songs all the time and whatnot. But it was a huge shock because like it's like a celebrity that you know and that like you grew up watching and listening to is suddenly like not there anymore.
It's a very Robin Williams-esque
mm-hmm,
situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was just, and that kind of like shook me during winter break, and like just and that kind of like whole because like mental health isn't a topic that's like freely discussed in Korea. It's very stigmatized. Really? And like if you tell people that you're like, you're getting therapy or you're taking like meds or things like that, people definitely view that as like a flaw. And they view it as like a handicap or a liability.
Not as like this person's going through this thing and they're taking steps to fix it, which is honestly valiant and that's
right.
just
but definitely. And so like people in Korea have like gotten fired because they like were open about their like personal history with mental health and things like that.
And that was more on a stigma of the mental health, not as much as like, let's say someone is very anxious and they just can't, work at the keyboard.
It's more of a stigma about the mental. They're just like
than their ability to work. Yeah.
So like even if they like work perfectly, like they're perfectly capable of doing their job, when people find out like, oh, like you're taking like anxiety meds, then that must affect you in some way that we can't see, or it will affect you in the future somehow. And like and it's awful. And so like and it's like a huge thing, especially within like the youth of South Korea, because a lot of teens commit suicide, and we're like the country with the highest rate of teen suicides.
Wow.
We're like the country with the highest rate of like literacy and education, but highest rate of like most unhappy people and like people who are like so like there's all these like statistics about like great productivity and like really good work ethic and blah blah blah, but then they also have like these awful statistics of like suicide and like depression. And
did you ever experience someone close to you committing suicide? Like, was that ever
no.
a factor? Like, through your high school, middle school career?
It's not close to me, but I've definitely had friends who went to middle schools and high schools where kids were, like,
committing suicide.
Committing suicide. And, like, it's awful. And it's something you hear on the news constantly, especially when, like, college entrance exams roll around or like things like that, or like when
that's right, because that sort of dictates the rest of their lives.
And like because like in America, like
the ACT,
I mean, just like whether you go to Harvard or whether you go to like Knox, like Harvard is like that school that has like more name value, right? Is more well known and is like prestigious.
Yeah.
But basically for undergrads, it's all just like,
it's the same thing.
It's the same thing. And like, just because you go to like a smaller private college doesn't mean you're like
destined for
failure. Or like you're not as great in academics or whatnot. It's just like, but like in Korea, there's a very steel cut like ranking of all the colleges. There's a top 3 and then a mid 7. And then, like, the lower 3. And those are only the schools in the capital. There are other schools that, like, other colleges and universities that aren't in the capital. But if you go there, it doesn't matter.
Wow.
Because those schools aren't that great anyways. Like, doesn't matter. Unless
it's so much pressure.
It's so much pressure. And so...
Did that also play part in why you came to Knox instead of one of those universities?
Yeah. I just couldn't handle the competition.
Yeah.
Because like in middle school and high school, when you get your report cards out, they rank you from like first place to like with how many people are in your grade.
Oh, we do that too, but I imagine it's less pressure or
we get and then they show you like your rank within the class and then your rank within the year. And that dictates what kind of high school you can go to.
Mm.
So there's like normal public schools, and then there's private high schools, And then there are like specialized high schools. So like there's like foreign language high schools, and then there's like the high school I went to is called a global high school. It was trying to make like it's a government run school that's supposed to act like a foreign language high school, because foreign language high schools are all private institutions. And they're all really expensive. So the only kids who ever get to go there are the kids whose parents have money to like send them to like after school lessons so they can study, and then like have money to like fund their education there. So, but like, yeah, and then there's like art high schools and science high schools and all sorts of different high schools where like it's just like super competitive. And if you end up going to a normal high school, your chances of going to like a more prestigious college like decreases dramatically. Cuz like from my high school, we had like around maybe like 10 kids per year get into like the most prestigious university in Korea, which is Seoul National University. But in a regular high school where there's like 10 times as many kids, their high school would be lucky to send even one or two. So like your chances of going to a prestigious university is decreased dramatically.
Yeah.
When you don't go to like a good high school.
My first sort of real, because you know we hear in the news like, oh, there are people in like the Eastern world are like much more academic and things like that, and you hear all that. My first, it's gonna sound silly, my first knowledge of like, wow, you have to like apply to high school was My Hero Academia, actually, where they're like middle schoolers who have to apply to like, and it's like, that's astonishing to me. I couldn't imagine, because like applying implies that you are ready to make a choice about your future. Yeah. And it's like when I was in 8th grade or middle school age, I couldn't make that decision, man. I questioned if I was able to make that decision. I mean, I love Knox, but you know what I mean? Like, I was 18 or like 19. I questioned my ability to make that decision.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then the thing, for me, like, we were only allowed to apply to one high school. And if you didn't get into that one high school, you were just going to whatever public high school, like you're getting rotated into. And so, it definitely, like, emphasizes, you know, like, this is the high school that you, like, you want to use, like, that one opportunity to get in. And so, like, that was a whole nerve-wracking process. And, but, like, just kind of, like, all those, like, different, like, cultural things have definitely affected me and who I am, like, at Knox. And so everything that I end up like creating just kind of like stems from that,
from those experiences. And
so a lot of the things that I've been writing about have just been about like me as a Korean person, or like kind of like the Korean American kind of background and culture and all of that. And then I realized at one point that I actually don't know much about like my like background as a Korean person, because I spent so much time like kind of pushing it away when I was actually in Korea and refusing to like accept it, that when I actually kind of like need to know that information to like write what I want to write here, I'm just kind of like drawing a blank.
Yeah.
Because I spent so much time not wanting to acknowledge it. And so, like, the big reason that I'm going back to South Korea for a study abroad and getting my minor in history is because I do want to, like, kind of, like, learn about Korean history and Korean culture. And I kind of want to see where that takes my writing. Yeah.
That's like... I am interested for sure. I think that's...
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really amazing. And gosh, now whenever I'm interviewing people and they say stuff and I just hear the story, I'm like, what do I talk about next? I guess really what I would want to pursue is, so you mentioned with creative writing you're wanting to do this now. Yeah. Are you working on anything right now, or is it just sort of that practice part?
Yeah, so I actually just submitted it today for Sherwood. It's for his screenwriting class, but it's another really depressing story. But it's basically the screenplay, like, I kind of wanted it to, like, chronicle my personal story, I guess. As, like, someone, as, like a kid who kind of grew up believing that I was, like, American.
Yeah.
And then realizing that that's not the only part of my identity, and, like, kind of coming to terms with that.
Yeah.
So it's a like, I have this story that I'm writing, and it's about this boy. It, like, the scene that I wrote out, it opens up with him standing on a rooftop.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wowzers.
It opens up with him standing on a rooftop, and then, like, kind of, like, flashes back to
saying, how
like,
did we get to this
how
point?
did we get to this point? Yeah.
Honestly, that's pretty, I mean, it sounds very stereotypical, but, like, I think that's a good hook, because, especially if you tell the story really well, because, not to bring it back to suicide, but suicide's, like, a real deal. Like, when you're on that edge, like, stuff's happened. Like, you're not just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
That's not
it's brutal. It's, because, I guess, like, I mean, I've never thought of myself as, like, even when I was younger and, like, growing up, people would always, like, you know, tell me, like, my biggest, like, I guess, like, the most attractive trait about me as a person is that, like, I'm so, like, optimistic, and I'm always, like, bright and filled with energy. And then, and, like, it, like, people tell that to me to the point where, like, I believe myself that I'm, like, an energetic, outgoing person. But then, like, there was a point when I was also, like, you know, really contemplating whether I should, like, stand on the ledge of the roof of my house.
Yeah.
And, like, because it just, like, you know, and
it's slowly, it's not like a spontaneous, it's like a slow eating.
Yeah.
It eats away at
Definitely.
you bit by bit.
Yeah. And, like, there would be moments when I was, like, awake at night, just, like, if I, like, end things now, then I won't have to, like, continue going to school. And I won't have to continue, like, struggling through my life. And it was definitely, it was never, like I'm always thinking about this.
Yeah, it wasn't
you know,
constant cloud
every day, and, like, it's the only thought that ever consumes me. But it was, like, you know, like, whenever there's, like, a quiet moment, and you just kind of sit there.
I feel like
kind of creeps in.
I feel like it very rarely is probably that. I think not until, like, the moment, you know, like, I feel like it, like I said, it's slow eating away at you, and it's creeping more and more into your mind. It's a hard time, and it's always hard to imagine, like, with the stuff I went through. It's always hard to imagine, like, and I'm sure you would agree, like, when people say, "Oh, it'll get better," you're like, "Yeah, but I want it to be better now."
Yeah,
you
definitely. Know? Yeah.
It's that time is. I look at time now and I go, "Oh, thank God for time!" Like, I love the fact that with time things change and get better. I love that. I love that time is the cure for a lot of things. But, you know, when you're in the thick of it, you're like,
when you're going through it, it's just a lot, and you, like, there's always, like, you know, that logical, rational part of you that's always like, I know it's gonna end. I know, like, I'll get through it.
Yeah.
But then you just need it to, like, end now.
I don't remember exactly, but I do remember that there was a point where I sort of just woke up and went, like, I'm, like, better. Like, I'm not through it, but, like, I'm good.
Yeah.
There was, like that moment, and it's like, it comes out of nowhere because you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and it eventually just pops up, and I'm like, whoa.
I had one of those moments when it was like the summer before we came to Knox. I just was, like, sleeping. I like went to bed really late, and then I woke up one morning, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to college. I'm going to, and, like, because I spent so much time wanting to, like, leave Korea, and then I woke up and I just realized, like, I will be leaving Korea.
You will be leaving.
Like, this is what I've, like, kind of, like, this is what I've been wishing for for the past like 6 years of my life, and it's going to happen. And I just kind of like laid there in my bed, and I was just like, oh my God. And it was such a like a, and it hasn't like been easy, you know, like, because college is not easy, and it's hard. Like, and there's a lot of like new things that stress me out, and new things that are like challenging and difficult. But just like at that moment, like me knowing that I'm like getting one step closer to where I want to be in my life was like such a like a relieving feeling. And I was just like, wow, like I'm really glad that I did, like, you know, kind of hold out and like make it through everything, because that one feeling was just so like
great.
It was so good.
Yeah, it really is quite something, and we really went into deep territory here, which is fine. Like, everyone goes through these things. I'm sure anyone listening is like, oh yeah, I've been through that, or maybe you're going through that, or you're going to go through that. Well, yeah, you're going to go through that. I don't think anyone's ever going to go through their whole life without going through that. Or at least not a great one, you know. I feel bad for people who never have to struggle, you know. I feel like struggling is a big part of like character growth and all that sort of thing. You
definitely come out like, even if you think you're the same person, you're definitely not the same person after you've gone through a struggle in your life.
For sure. No, yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like, there was a point where I was like, man, like, I felt like I was like back where I started. But then I had to look back and go, I'm not back where I'm like genuinely, like, you know, people grow and change. And you, what was I was talking to someone earlier, and I was like, it's so easy to look at the things you haven't accomplished and the things you haven't done. Yeah. We very rarely take the time to really reflect on the things we have done and have accomplished.
Definitely, yeah. That's
like, shoot, we're in like improv exec. We have gone through a bunch of these terms of school and still passing, and like we're doing good.
We are doing good. I think that's kind of like the mindset that I've been like trying to have, because I focus like, I just like, also, I don't know how much you know about like Asian parents, but a lot of Asian parents, like, I don't know what it is, but a lot of Asian parents, and like my parents specifically, like, you know, kind of gave me a lot of tough love. In the form of like, you know, they want me to be better. They know I can do better. But with the way that they express it is through like insults. Yeah. And just being like, you're awful at this, and like, blah, blah, you know.
Yeah. Like, I mean, continue the thought if you.
It's just like, I guess, but, and so like, I kind of grew up hearing like, you know, my mom and my dad saying things like, you can't, like, about all the things that I wasn't able to do, you know. And that's kind of what they just tried to like use to like push me to do it, but it didn't work. Yeah.
How does that like impact you? Do you think that impacts you at all now? Like the fact that the way you were brought up was a lot of sort of insults to try to get you going? Yeah,
so I'm definitely trying to be like kinder to myself. And so like even now, like from like an ocean away, my parents, you know, like when I don't bring home results that they want, or like when I don't give them, you know, like answers that they want, they'll just be like what the heck? Yeah. And like kind of berate me for it. But like I kind of like let myself, because like compared to like several years ago, I wasn't even close to like getting into college. Yeah. With the way that like my grades were looking. And so like I just keep I like try to tell myself like, you know, like you've made it this far and like you can go further without being so like, you know, like I wasn't able to do this, I wasn't able to that. I'm like, you know, telling myself that like this is what I have done, and because I've done all these things, I can do all these other things
as well. Yeah, for sure. Well, so we've talked about improv a bit. We've really gone into depth about like your journey, I suppose, to here, and like your Korean heritage. We haven't really talked about much with your interactions with Common Ground, and of course, as always, we don't have to go into everything, but like your journey to your current like gender identity and all those sort of things, right? what was like, because your parents were very religious and they would tend to be against that sort of thing.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
what was that like?
It's so they don't know.
They don't know.
They don't know. I'm not out to them in any way, shape, or form. It's really funny because, I don't know, like people. I feel like if people like look at me, they like make assumptions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like I feel like generally the assumption would be like that person cannot be straight. Like if they just like look at me,
yeah,
and I'm like that's fine, but like my parents are very, very oblivious. They're either really, really like more dense than I give them credit for, or like they're just kind of like choosing not, because it hasn't been brought to their attention. They're choosing not to like look, like they're choosing to ignore it. Like they'd rather live in ignorance.
Then yeah.
And so it's whatever, but and it's kind of I don't, my parents are very old fashioned. Very like they've said some pretty messed up things to me about a lot of things. And like it's to the point where I'm like the only way I'll ever be able to like tell them is if I'm like moved out, have a job,
yeah,
living in my own apartment kind of deal, where like I'm not reliant on them
yes.
for like support. But I think I've always kind of been like more like tomboyish, I guess.
Yeah.
And when I was actually when I was younger, I really, really wanted to be like, you know, more feminine. And like so like there are pictures of me at like homecoming in like a strapless black dress and like, you know, and like in like 5-inch heels and like trying really hard. And
yeah, that
like,
doesn't fit you. I don't feel like it fits you at all.
It doesn't fit me now, but like back then, that was kind of like I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I enjoyed wearing those clothes, and I enjoyed doing that. And then like at one point in like middle school, I was like, because I was wearing like a uniform every day to school, and I was like looking down at like my skirt, and I was just like, this is ugly. Like, who in their right minds would ever make like anybody wear this? And I just kind of like started changing like the clothes that I wear and like how I presented myself. And I cut my hair in like what would be like my junior year of high school. And before then, I just always had long hair. And like but I didn't do anything with it. Like I hated having long hair. Yeah. And I just cut it on a whim, and then I realized how much I prefer it being short. Because it's so much, like, not only do it, like, I think it looks better on me, but it's just, like, more comfortable. Yeah. And, like, that's kind of been, like, my whole aesthetic, just being comfortable. And
as you're wearing lazy pants. Yep. Yeah, you're comfortable, and I respect that, because I also dress for comfort. So.
Comfort is a big thing.
Yes.
But and then I guess it just kind of tends, like being comfortable kind of tends to lead towards like more masculine appearance. Yeah. So like I dress so like when I do like want to dress nicely, I want to wear pants. And so that leads me to wearing like a button down and like nice pants, and you know.
And so like when did you know, or when did you just know that you didn't identify with what you were born with and what you were raised to?
So like sexuality wise, I guess, I was like very like your quote unquote stereotypical 12-year-old girl when I was younger, because I was into like Twilight. Yeah. And I was like, you know, it was really, my friends from elementary school and were like on my birthday, they'd like cover my locker in posters of like Robert Pattinson and being like, you know, for our future Mrs. Pattinson. And I'd be like, you know, and that was like the whole thing. And then, but then, in middle school, I ended up having like this crush on a girl in my class who was like, she was like really nice, and like she like kind of took the time to like help me with my homework and things. because she knew I didn't understand Korean, and so like she like just kind of like took, even though she didn't have to, and like she'd always like partner with me for group projects and things, and so I was kind of like attracted to like that kindness.
Yes.
And so I was like, oh, that's so nice. Like, why are you so nice to me?
Yeah.
And that was kind of when I was just like, oh, okay. I guess like I can like both, you know, guys and girls, and like that's fine. And like that's still how I identify now as like a pansexual person. Yeah. So like I honestly don't care. I think as long as like I'm attracted to you, who you are as a person, that's like the most important thing.
Most important thing,
right?
Yeah.
And people always joke about like how like, you know, like you have to about like, you know, oh, I don't like, you know, look at like people's like faces or whatever. I'm attracted to personality. But I think that's like really important. Like personality is like, you know, because that's like the deciding factor of whether or not you're going to like continue with that person. Right?
That's like someone can have like a particular physical self that you really enjoy, but that's not going to matter if, in the long term. Yeah. The long term, it's like, can I stand this person? Can I talk with this person? Definitely.
So, and then I've always just like, you know, I like people, even though I hate people at the same time.
It is a complexity in your life.
It is a complexity. Love and hate
people.
It's a complexity, but yeah, So I just kind of, it's whatever.
It like oftentimes like I think a lot of people think it's something like, and I'm sure I used to think this too. It's like this big decision thing. It's not really. Most stories do not have a point where like I just decided to start liking it. It's like what you described, like, oh, I like this person, and sort of that reflection of like, oh, this is the case. And I don't know. I don't think people give enough credit to like the natural, just almost how normal it is.
And I think it's definitely a lot of people seem to think like you can't like. You're either like, you know, you either know from like a very young age, like when you're 5 or something, like, you know. You just know. But like, I don't think people realize that, you know, like people do change over time. And this is one of the aspects of who you are as a person that can change. Yeah. And so like when I was like 10 or 11, I wasn't like, I didn't care for any of like the female characters in whatever TV show I watched. I was like all over the male actors and like, you know, like woo. But like getting older, like who I was more attracted to or like who I was more interested in, like that just like kind of changed naturally.
It's just a change in taste. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And so your parents don't know. That's interesting to me.
Nope.
But so was your real time of like really being able to come out at Knox just because of how open it was? Like, was that like a very liberating time, I'd presume?
It was. A lot, and like there was this whole like when I was younger, in middle school, like, I told a couple of friends, and like my closest friends, and they were all like fine with it because they were also like all like pretty like American. Yeah. Right.
It's like whatever.
And it was fine. But then I told this one girl that my friend was dating, and then we weren't friends anymore. Wow. And then she started spreading rumors all over the school, and made my life miserable. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm not telling anyone ever again. But
it's like decided, never
telling anyone again. And then I was able to be more open about it in high school, because a lot of the kids at my high school were just kind of like, they either like didn't care or like didn't really, you know, didn't really ask any deeper questions or anything.
Yeah, they just go, okay, that's you.
So, but it wasn't until like I came to Knox that I was like fully like, oh yeah, you know, with the whole like gender identity and whatever. Yeah. And like gender identity was also something that was like very like strange to me, because people like like I know, like, because like I tell people now that like I'm like non-binary.
Yeah.
But like when people like misgender me or like like use she her pronouns or like call me like like that girl or like whatever, it doesn't bother me. Like I don't really care. Because like some people like it's easier to just let them do whatever than to like explain. And I honestly don't care about pronouns because pronouns isn't something that like I'm used to.
Yeah.
But that wasn't something that like I came to understand until I came to Knox, because before coming to Knox I've never met people who identified as like non-binary or whatever, like in the middle or like not anywhere.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. Like before coming to Knox, I was very ignorant. And I'm still, I'm still ignorant about it, of course. I feel like it'd be hard pressed to not be ignorant about it for the most part. But like, yeah, it is definitely very intriguing. But I used to think that remembering pronouns would be hard. I have a fairly, though I have found that I just sort of use they all the time. Like
it's really funny because people don't realize that when they talk about people they don't know, they automatically default to they.
To they, yeah.
Yeah, and so
like, did you hear what they had to say? It's like not. It's maybe plural, but often it's singular. Like, did you hear what they said? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, even if it's not something that people do consciously, people definitely do use they as a singular pronoun. As a singular
pronoun, yeah.
But like, when it's like brought to the forefront, people are like, "What?
What?"
Which
I find that interesting. It's like linguistically interesting that people just go, "That doesn't make sense," but we do.
Yeah.
I find that interesting. No, for sure. I know a lot of people have similar experiences with coming to Knox. Like, I don't want to use any names, it's their story, but like people who have come here and been like, I've really been able to like be myself.
Yeah.
Some people have opposite experiences. I know some people that are like, I come to Knox and it's like, I don't feel like me. And I feel like that's has a lot more to do with the transition from being home to here.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, most certainly. Yeah. And so you joined Common Ground. You have an exec position. You are
I'm PR
for both Common Ground and improv.
Yep.
You made a wonderful improv board recently. I enjoy it.
Thank you.
It's real simple, and I actually like that it's simple.
Thank you.
Like, I ain't knocking down the previous one, because the previous one was so like lively and like colorful, but like I kind of like, I don't know, for me, I feel like the previous board is nicer for like those in improv. You know what I mean? We're like, oh yeah, it's so nice, awesome. But like, I feel like just for someone walking by, that like simpler design is like, oh yeah, like I can see everything. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it does. Yeah, I definitely did. I kind of wanted to, like, I've told you this before, but like with the black and white improv T-shirts, that's kind of the feeling I wanted to go for with the black and white, the improv board that I made. So
yeah. It's great. I love how simple our like improv logo and like, which is the improv club. Like, we aren't like what Bradley has the barbecue kittens.
Oh right, I haven't been to a Bradley show, so
they're but wild.
I've heard stories.
They're wild. I love the Bradley guys a lot. Bradley's probably my well, it's kind of hard to say because I really love the Bradley shows. I think they're just fantastic. I think I always take notes. They're really lovely. They're really good at improvising. I think my favorite group is, on like a person level, is probably Augustana, just because they literally brought us out to lunch and like hanged out with us.
Cute.
Yeah, which
nice.
Though the Bradley people did offer for us to spend the night, but we obviously didn't do that because not everyone would be comfortable doing that, obviously. But they were very, genuinely kind. Man, we've covered a lot of ground, and now I'm just trying to think what else I should ask. Oh, I want to ask you some things about, I suppose I want to ask you about, so you were talking about how you like to create stories. Improv is a good source for that, of course, and writing, you are pursuing creative writing. And we know about your history minor. You're wanting to learn more about your culture back home and your history. What about the psych minor? Why that? Why is that part of your academic plan?
Because like, whenever you write a story, it's always about people or like some sort of sentient being that you're writing about, right?
Yeah.
And I think like in order to like write about people, you have to know how people work. And so originally I was gonna do a creative writing and psychology double major when I came to Knox, and I was like pretty set on it. And the thing that I really wanted to study most in the psychology department is like personality, and just like why people act the way they are.
I find that also really interesting.
And why and how they are who they are, and just kind of like how that works with everyone else around them. And I just found that really interesting. So that's, and like, I also find like mental disorders and like mental health related things really interesting as well, because that's also like a very like integral part of like human, I guess, in humans.
And it's a fairly new thing too that we're actually taking seriously now and looking into.
Yeah, because like I believe that like there's not a single person in this world who doesn't have like, you know, mental and like emotional struggles. Like some people have it to like varying degrees, and some people, you know, need like in order to stabilize themselves and to like, you know, and be able to like function. Some people do need like special treatment or like care or like medication. But some people, like, it's just like a day-to-day struggle that they have. But like everyone, whether it's like whether it's like 1% or like 100% or like whatever, wherever they are, I think everyone does have like, you know, struggles with their mental well-being and their emotional well-being. And so that's also something that I'm like very interested in, like kind of like learning more about and studying about. And ultimately, like, that's like, I want to like incorporate that in my writing. And so that's why I was going to go for a double major. And then I realized I really don't have time for a double major.
Yeah, double majors are a lot.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
And especially because like creative writing and psychology are two very like strong majors at Knox, and they both require so many things. I was just like, wow, I can't do all of this and graduate on time.
Wow.
So I've decided to just minor in it.
Yeah.
And then minoring in it allows me to also pursue history, because I'm also
really,
yeah,
as I said before. Okay, that'll make sense. So it's all in pursuit of being able to better write, but also like just personal interest of yours. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of what it is, very much so. And so with that storytelling, something new you started winter term, was you got into a D&D session.
I did.
D&D campaign with me, and
it's so good.
It sort of incorporates a lot, and incorporates character writing, because you're your own character and you go through these different things. It also incorporates improv. It's just a fun game too. So like, what experiences there? How does that, if it does impact anything, or just, I don't know, it's just an aspect I know.
I honestly think from D&D, I learned the most from you. Just kind of like the way that you DM, and the way that you kind of like craft the world. I find it so fascinating.
It's fun.
Because one of like my biggest struggles is also like one of the reasons why I've never like finished like a quote unquote like a novel or anything is because I royally suck at world building. And it's fun like when I like start getting into it, but I honestly hate working out all the kinks and all of the like, you know, all the rules and all the laws. And it's why like a lot of the things that I write now are like more grounded in the real world, because the real world is already there for you to interact with, right? So like whenever we're playing D&D, and just kind of like the way that like, you know, like looking at all the maps that you've drawn and all of like the different like characters that you create and how they interact with all of the cities, I just find that so fascinating. And that's honestly one of the most enjoyable parts for me as like a player in your campaign, because
I appreciate that.
It's and so like I've been making a lot of like mental notes with like the world and like with the way that you DM, and
Oh dear, I hope it has been
It's
consistent. Because sometimes I don't know if that's consistent with what I've said, but
I mean, like,
you gotta retcon things sometimes.
I know nothing about like the ship's diameters or like whatever.
Yeah,
know?
that's where I suck. I'm really bad at like exact dimensions. Someone's
Yeah.
go like, "How heavy is this?" And I go, it's there."
I mean,
I remember early on when Farkon, Eric's character, charged Korgus, and I said they slide across the thing, and goes, "Really?" And I go, "Yeah, I know it doesn't make physical sense, but we're saying that's what's happening." Just because I can't be bothered to calculate. It's like, because when you're DMing, oftentimes the story and the events are kind of more important than physics and what makes sense. And also just like, and most certainly, I appreciate that. And I think D&D, it's not that I'm good at world building. It's that D&D, and I've DM'd a couple of times, so I guess that helps. But when you're playing D&D and you're a DM, that's like, you just get to focus on world building, and you actually don't have to focus much on character, honestly, because they have the characters. All you need is like, there's this city, and this city it looks sort of like this. It's very like Donomabashis, for example. It's very clean, sort of cobblestone, stone roads, stone buildings, some very minimal wood because they don't have a lot of wood there. So mostly stone, but very fine stonework. Fabrics, they really love fabrics. And then I go, I don't know, Donobabash is an isolationist country that, they don't know the outside world. And then you think, okay, why is that? Maybe there's this powerful wizard who's like, I've erased memories of outside world. I've made it so no one knows anything. And you kind of just build from there. And then oftentimes what I find is you work from like either a big point or a small point. So like when I make characters, I just sort of go, take Renoa's dad, for example. I just sort of start off from a point of like, who like the kind of character who would leave their daughter behind from a young age to go to the outside world. And then essentially a lot of his character stems from the philosophy of the ends justify the means. So I take that and I go, it's the character that embodies that. Or Alan, he's just a good, humble dad. But then through improv and doing things, the characters get to grow. So I would say if you ever want practice world building, just like DM a one shot, two shot, or like just DM something because a lot of it is like you sort of just sit there and the characters say things and in your brain you just go, oh, wouldn't this be swell? Wouldn't this be cool? And then you just do that. And often when you make a map, what I do a lot, not so much for the Omega Seas, which is where you guys are, because that was very much just like, I want different islands at different city-states. Because I wanted variety, but I wanted it close together. What I'll do is I'll just take a string, throw it on a piece of paper, and then draw around it, and that's my continent.
Hey.
But yeah, I'm really glad that you're enjoying that, and I think it's because everything we've been talking about, D&D like incorporates psychology, it incorporates writing.
It does.
Like I want to go back, like Anne has that journal that she writes, but I want to go back at the end of this and like try to write down everything that happened, which would take a long time, but just because it's such a fun story, because it's a story you make together. Yeah. Which I think is the best.
I just, every time, like, I'm able to throw a curveball at you, it makes me happy. It makes my heart so warm. I'm so glad that, like, we're at where we are at the story because I like, royally screwed up and took us to the big bad.
Well, it shows how much improv is a part of it because I sort of went like, I know I want Jean there to try to integrate, but then I realized very quickly, Jean needs an escape plan. Because he's smart. He's not just some idiot. He needs an escape plan. So I went, well, if they collect magical items, we'll say they have some sort of teleportation thing. We'll ignore the fact that Lark had to run away to escape and didn't just teleport out of the way. I'll retcon that and just say he ran away, then did it. Because he needs a way to escape. So I just said, okay, that makes sense. That wouldn't be too odd. Makes sense. And then that led to me realizing, but they can use it too. And I went, oh no. And I just remember whenever you used the magical item to teleport back to the ship, I was like, well, I guess we're here now. I'm going to say that Remus probably isn't going to kill you. Goldfinger isn't immediately going to try to kill you. It will probably play with you and maybe see if you can be of use. So that happened. And that was a curveball, but it's great because that's creating a better story a more big story than I could have told at all by myself. Because little do you know, or maybe you can know, the things that are happening with you guys in Orath and all that were going to happen separate from you guys. You guys were going to be doing all new stuff, and then you'd do that, and then you'd hear about, like, this revolution and all this craziness that happened, and, like, so that I just was like, oh, yeah, that'll happen, and I don't have to worry about it because I'm God, and I can say whatever happens there. But now, you guys are there. I don't know what's going to happen there now. You know, I had a set idea of the success or failure of, you know, I knew what was going to happen, and now I don't. And I'm like, well, great. And it's impacted the world in more ways than you know already. A lot.
Oh, I'm so excited for our session this Thursday.
Yeah, it's absurd. Like, a lot of things you guys, I can't say this without really ruining anything. You guys changed Goldfinger in the way that Goldfinger's now wanting to recruit one of you two instead of someone he was going to try to recruit that you guys have met. Which is crazy to me. So it's like it's crazy. It's fun. But you've changed the world to that degree and like everything that's happening. And I'm like, but you've also kind of screwed over Anne and Kat in a way because they are going to have to fight things that I thought all of you would be there to fight. That's fine. Well, it happens.
You know, sometimes you win and sometimes you don't.
But yeah, no, I love it. And the reason I bring it up is I do love it. And I think you like it. It's just because you were bringing up creative storytelling. And I think it's something that's been introduced to your life that you are interested in and enjoy.
I didn't realize just how fun, like, tabletop RPGs could be. Like, well, that's one thing. But then I also didn't realize just how, like, because, you know, when you think of, like, RPG games, like, in general, it's just like, oh, it's a game, you know, right? I didn't realize how much, like, thought and effort that everyone has to bring to the table in order to make it, like, a fun game.
Yeah.
And it's just, like, it definitely, it's not something that you just play once and then forget about. It's something that you're constantly having to, like, think about and, like, work at and, like, plan for next time.
Yeah, and it's so fun to, like, whenever the moment, like, you guys are going to go through the Knoll Cave, you guys are, like, trying to plan. You're like, what do we do? And then Tharkon was like, I don't want to be a part of this. And then all that fun stuff. And it's just, and what you were saying, when you look back, my favorite thing about D&D is when you look back, it's not always the table you remember. It's not you guys sitting at the table. It's like when you go, oh, remember that one time we fought the hag and, you know, Tharkon had the shields up and we were all going to die. You don't and when you remember that, it's not you guys at the table. You remember your character, like, in that situation. And that's what I love about it. It's like, it's almost as if you've actually experienced this with people.
Definitely. And it's always like, because, like, whenever we talk about the hag, that hag fight with, like, the green flame and everything, there's always, like, one recurring image that comes to mind is, like, when everyone is hiding behind Tharkon's
or, like,
big
when
shields.
The hag freaking destroyed your fae creature. Yeah.
Oh, that's a memory I didn't need. Need
to remember.
Thanks.
Or the Knoll Pack. Well, I remember one of the things I remember from that is, like, the image of, like, the Knoll Pack Lord, like, completely silent because of the Knife of Silence in his back, just charging at you guys, or Lark falling from the ceiling. That whole cave fight went horribly. All because
was awful.
I just remember Kat was like, I was like, okay, Kat, how do you hit this Knoll? Because you guys were, like, stealthing in the cave trying to kill them fast and quietly. And she goes, I hit him across the chest. And I go, okay. He screams. I was giving Kat the opportunity to be like, I slice his neck. I'm like, okay, fine. But I love that it is that detailed. Like, if you don't do something specific, like, this will happen. And then the whole cave is just like, we're going to attack you now.
Oh, I love D&D. It's been so fun. Like,
yeah, and there's more to come, and
so good.
It's that weird thing I was saying. It's like I'm trying to make it to where you guys come back together without making it happen. Because when in doubt, I'm DM. I could just be like, you guys all teleport and you're together. But that'd be boring. Unless, no, it'd be boring. So I've been trying to make it to where, like, you guys are still communicating, which is good. You guys have the book that they look at and all that.
Trisha's character is communicating. Yeah. I'm gallivanting.
For sure. And Lugo and all that sort of thing. And so in my mind, and of course there's a variety of other options from this, I'm like, either they continue to go with the Donomabasha's diplomacy team. Maybe they, as Anne was saying, we should just get an airship from Pocky and like travel by ourselves. It's like, that could happen. Maybe you guys will keep working for Goldfinger. Heck if I know. I don't know what'll happen there. Maybe you guys will go to Frorin the Great Frost, which is sort of what I've been setting up, which is really that. I mean, it's obviously like what I'm like wanting to happen, but also I recognize that like these are the other paths, and I'm ready for that. I'm ready to yes and any of those. All you guys need to worry about is like, what would my character want to do, but not so like. I feel like you do kind of have to break the character thing to be like, let's not have me just be on my own. Because we were this group, and I should try to come up with, it's like an improv, what's it called? An improv, or just in general, a reason, a explanation, just like a, you know, like when you,
wasn't that just basically like your objective, I guess?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think of like, you know, whenever they're talking about the multiple level thing, they're like, you have to justify it.
Yes. You have to
justify why your character, for whatever reason, wants to be with this group of people or doesn't want to be alone. You know what I mean? There's that element to it where you're like, I can't just say like, well, Ellerin, of course, wants to work for Goldfinger no matter what everyone else is doing. Unless you really want to do that. And then you talk to me and I go, that could be fun. Then we do that. We just can't have everyone do that because then it'd be chaos. But genuinely, like, let's say you were like, I do want to keep working for Goldfinger or Gracious. And I'd be like, okay, everyone else will be doing their thing and you'll be doing your thing on the side. And I'll find a way to have them interact with each other at some point, you know, and we'll go from there. That was a side tangent.
I think that's the beauty of just D&D and like, on a bigger whole, improv.
Yeah, that anything can happen. That's for sure. It's just D&D is nice because it has rules and that sort of thing. But you've been enjoying Nox from what I understand. You're going to be going to South Korea for money, and also it'll be nice, I think, for you to be doing academics at home probably.
Yeah, I'm actually really interested in like going to like a college class because I spent so much of my time in South Korea like hating being in a classroom environment.
Yeah,
and I'm wondering if like being in a college classroom environment like might change that or like I don't know, give me like a new opinion on it. Yeah,
that'll be interesting for sure. Now I'm sure there's so much more we could talk about, but it is sort of getting to a point where I think we'll close it off. But I'll likely have you as a guest again just because I like talking with you and you're a good friend. Although we'll still talk about your life next time a bit, but usually I think in my mind, if I have returning guests, we're likely to talk about a topic more so than just an interview. Yeah. But what I will ask of you is what I ask of everyone who comes on my show. The last question that I always ask. If you could say anything to a future you watching this, listening to this, watching this video, or family, probably not family, or like just friends, or anyone who's listening to this, if there's anything you could say or want to say it now.
I don't have anything like profound to say. Yeah. But I think like
just like future you know.
Just kind of like, you know, like just like from like talking with you about myself and just kind of like retrospectively, I don't know, thinking about like what I've said. Yeah. I guess like the biggest thing that I would want to say to like a future me who's listening to this is or like just anybody who's listening who needs to like hear these words is just kind of like, I guess you shouldn't let any, usually the only thing that like kind of hinders yourself from doing things is yourself. And I think like, you know, people try really hard, like people don't like change, and it's hard for people to get used to change. And I think the only way that like a person is able to kind of like move forward with a life is to like move forward, you know, let go, and learning how to let go and learning how to kind of just like let things go with the flow. And like if it's not in your control, it's not in your control, and like you shouldn't try to change things or people when you aren't able to, and just kind of like try not to hold yourself back from being too rigid to change, I guess.
Well, nice. I like that. And that'll be a wonderful place. This has been To Stop Off. Erin, thank you so much.
Thank you for
being
having
here.
me.
Hopefully it recorded well. It looks like it's been like picking up and doing well. I hope anyone listening to the actual WVKC has enjoyed it. I have had to put the mic volume all the way up so it can pick us up both sides kind of here. I've actually, just real quick thoughts before we close, I guess, just like I enjoy this far more than the live stream. Because when it's live streaming, you're like looking at the chat and the screen. So distracting. Yeah. I felt like this is much more like I'm just having a conversation with Erin. That is a conversation I want to have with everyone, like about them and their lives. So it's great. I love it. So I think I like this way more. I will try to upload this. I think I want to try to do a schedule where I record Monday, upload by Wednesday. That's the schedule I'm trying to go with.
I think that's good.
So yeah, that's it. This has been WVKC, the voice of Knox, dash, or like, what's this called?
Backslash.
Forward slash something.
This is
one of those, a diagonal slash. The big picture.
Yeah.
And we will see you guys next week when I think I'm interviewing Rob.
Frisbee Rob?
Yeah, Frisbee Rob.
I love him.
Yeah, it should be really fun. I'm really
Rob,
excited.
if you're listening to this, you're the greatest. My dude.
And that's where we'll end it off. Okay. Goodbye, everyone. Hope the music on the whatever is good. Have a great day. That's where we end it. Okay.